It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of Bank Information. Take charge of your financial future with your personal bank. Now here's Ference Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show, and I'll tell you what, I have so much stuff to talk about today, I don't even know where to start. I think the thing I'm going to do first is, I probably received one of the nicest messages I think I've received from any listener. And the gentleman, I won't use his name, but he'll recognize the message when I share this. Is he was talking about, he was listening to one of my previous shows last week. I was talking about the freedom of speech attacks and the pushbacks and some of the encouraging things that are happening. And I mentioned about being closet conservatives. And his comment was so, it was so encouraging. I'll put it that way. He goes, I was actually driving to the airport to pick up my wife, and he goes, what you were talking about echoed like to the T what I've been sharing with friends and family and how I feel. He goes, I was enjoying listening to your show so much, I was hoping my wife's flight was late. Now, I'll tell you what, hopefully it wasn't, but that's some high compliments. I really appreciate it. Like he said in his message, though, he goes, I was starting to get frustrated because I was going to miss part of it, and then you mentioned that all the shows are on our website. You can listen to any previously recorded shows anytime. You can go to yourpersonalbank.com, by the way. And he goes, that made him feel a whole lot better. He says, please make sure it's posted, which it is, by the way. And he was certainly going to pass that on to others. I encourage anyone to, of course, go anytime you want to listen to any of the previously recorded shows. They're all there. You can listen to them, pass them on, share them, whatever. And I've been talking a lot about political things that are going on with our country and money, how it affects our money in terms of retirement, putting money away, our ability to earn and keep money, pass it on to the next generation, all those things. And I've got to admit, it's becoming a challenging time to share some of these, what I consider to be very common sense ideas. I don't really believe that I'm very political. I don't think about politics a lot. And I know anybody who's been listening to the show for a while probably are now laughing, but I'm really not. I don't think about politics that much. It's not a big part of my life. It's not something I typically focus on with my life and my family and all that. But this past year, no question, it's become much more in the forefront because so many things, and it started with the COVID shutdowns, so many things that our government has done to, I don't know any other way to put it, but interfere with our lives. And now it's getting to the point where I don't even recognize what they're doing. I mean, they're not representing me. I'll put it that way. And of course, 4 years ago, it was very much out there. Many Democrats were, of course, very frustrated about Hillary losing to Trump, and they were very vocal about Trump's not my president. Well, I can tell you folks that I feel the same way right now about Biden and his administration. It's not that I don't like Biden as a person. He seems to be a nice enough guy. That's not the issue. My issue is with the policies he's taken. And the direction that his administration is going, I don't agree with, almost across the board. I don't feel like I'm being represented by my country, and maybe I'm a reprobate. I don't know, but in terms of, I don't really think I've changed my positions. How's that? Again, I don't feel like I'm overly political. I just feel like it's basic common sense. And unfortunately, it's like common sense is just taking a complete vacation. I mean, I had a mentor many years back who was a very, very successful businessman who said, common sense is not very common. Well, right now, when it comes to common sense in our government, it's like they're not even in the same ballpark. They're not even in the same galaxy, it seems like. And so many of what the views that I feel and how it affects us, how it affects our country, how it affects our citizens, how it affects our money, all those kinds of things, our families, our personal lives, our freedoms, which I think, and I have to believe this today, I I just don't. I don't believe the majority of Americans today agree with what I would call the leftist agenda that we're seeing. It's been lightning speed and just fast and furious, one thing after another. I mean, I'm a fiscal conservative. So right now, being a fiscal conservative is a very lonely and very frustrating. I have to admit, when this 1.9 trillion, what was called, I'm going to say, quote unquote, COVID relief package, and of course, less than 10% of it had anything to do with health issues at all. So that's, frankly, calling it a COVID relief package is just, frankly, a joke. It frustrated me. I was down. I wouldn't say depressed, but discouraged, certainly, saddened. And I'm saddened, folks. I'm saddened mostly not for folks more like myself who have been more well-established and we've had time to build a career and earn some money. I'm really saddened for those who are younger and starting out. I was talking to a group of young people just this past weekend, and my daughters are both teenagers. And these folks they were young people in their early 20s, and they were asking me some questions about this. And I said, unfortunately, our government just spent your inheritance. $6 trillion, folks, in the last year has been spent now by our federal government. And I've seen various studies in terms of the economic impact of the shutdowns. And the estimates that I see, I've read, are the total economic devastation, which is what it is estimated to going to be about $450 billion. Now, that's a big number. That's bad, okay? But our federal government has spent $6 trillion. And by the way, if you don't know, 1,000 billion is a trillion. So in other words, our federal government has spent roughly 12 times more in the past year than the total economic devastation by all the shutdowns across the nation. I mean, maybe that puts things in perspective a little bit, because when you throw these huge numbers out, I'm going to tell you, they're incomprehensible. I mean, the numbers are so big. I mean, they're talking 30 trillion in debt by the end of this year. That's just, there's almost no way to comprehend that number. But when you think about how many businesses were lost and jobs were lost and how much economic loss there was due to some parts of our country being literally shut down for a year, and all that adds up to what, 450 billion, give or take, and our government spends more than 10 times that amount, that puts things in a bit of perspective. And by the way, this economic shutdown, like with unemployment and the things we saw early on, were the worst numbers we'd ever seen since the Great Depression. So this is significant. This is significant financially. And I guess what I want to share, the thought I want to share, and tying it to money, and a thought I haven't really heard very much, a little bit here and there, but not very much, is you can't spend that kind of money and not have consequences. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to discuss that further on the show today. That's really, I think, what I want to really focus on is, what are the economic consequences going to be for us and our children and our grandchildren and probably our great-grandchildren and maybe a generation or two after that? I don't know. What are the economic impact going to be on what's happened just in the past year alone? I mean, they're already talking about spending more. And I'm like, they're just blowing like a bazooka money like we've never seen, like no country has ever seen in the history of man. Okay, this has never been done before, not to this kind of level, not even close. Okay, what are the economic consequences going to be? I had a prediction I was going to make, and I thought, when I first thought about this prediction on this show that I was going to state, I thought it was going to be a bold prediction. But part of the prediction is already coming true even before I made it. And, what is that prediction? Well, here's my prediction for you. And, well, let me tell you this. I'm going to say the sad part first, then I'll share the prediction. Here's what really saddened me. Apparently, this last 1.9 trillion quote-unquote COVID relief package, and again, only less than 10% had anything to do with health stuff. It was popular, and in fact popular by something like nearly half of Republicans even. This is the part that really saddens me. I expected Democrat folks to be favorable to it, which they were. But the majority of Americans are favorable to it because they're going to get checks. In other words, if you're under a certain income limit, you're going to get a $1,400 check per person and some money, extra money for dependents if you have them. Now, sure, everybody likes getting a check, and it's being touted as free money. Well, let me say this right off the bat. Folks, it's not free money. We're going to talk about that some more. First of all, there's no such thing as free money, particularly from the government. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit and share a little financial literacy here that I believe is sorely lacking. If somebody thinks this is free money, they don't understand how money works. And they really need a lesson, and they need to learn. And I'm not going to be political about this. I'm just going to state some facts and some common sense, hopefully. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. What really truly saddened me is that so many people were in favor of this because, well, they're going to get a check. Okay? And it was sold to them, it's being sold to us as, like I said, free money. Now, whatever happened to the concept of if it's too good to be true, it probably is. In other words, we all know, we've talked to a salesperson. You talk to a slick, hard closing type salesperson who'll, makes promises or makes statements that are, well, frankly, too good to be true. And most of us are skeptical or have a healthy skepticism of those claims, as we rightly should. Why do we have that skepticism when somebody's trying to oversell something to us? Yet we lack that skepticism when we hear about it from a politician or from government or our media. See, we need to have the same level of skepticism, if not even more. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that and why. Because if we don't start having some of that healthy skepticism, we're not going to have any money left, folks. And that's kind of what it boils down to. So stay tuned in the next segment. Don't miss it.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. I've been talking today about, well, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And what I'm really referring to is this latest COVID relief package, and I'll say quote unquote because less than 10% of it actually went to health issues. But it's actually popular by the majority of Americans because they're going to receive a check. Now, frankly, I find that incredibly saddening. What I attribute that to is a lot of good marketing, a lot of good propaganda, and a real lack of financial literacy. Because one of the concepts I've been sharing for quite some time now here is very simple. The government has no money. And I will repeat that. I want to say that again. This is something people really need to understand, and unfortunately it's been lost. The government has no money. The money they spend comes from either printing dollars or taxing us or inflating dollars to make sure they can pay it back at a cheaper rate. But really, as far as creating dollars to spend, they're either printing the dollars, frankly, out of almost nothing, a lot of people think, or taxing, or tax dollars. So whose money is it really? It's not that complicated. It's ours. And when the government does spend money on whatever it is, who's impacted by that? Of course, we are, the citizens, all right? It's really that simple. And it's such a simple, basic concept that's, frankly, been lost. And so when people, they're happy because they're getting a check. Here's my prediction I'm going to say first. I was going to say this in the last segment, but I'm going to say it now. If you do receive a check, I'm going to predict in the near future, you're going to pay many times more than the amount you received. I'll explain why in a minute. Also, I have a second prediction. If you don't receive a check because of your income or whatever other reason, you're going to pay many times more than the amount that was received by the folks that did. Why? Well, it's really quite simple. We're all going to pay the consequences of the government spending $6 trillion of our money over the past year. And how is that going to happen? Folks, it's really quite simple. When you have a lot of dollars chasing products and services, it's the basic law of supply and demand. It's economics 101. And that is, if you have a lot of dollars chasing an item, what does the price of the item do? It goes up. It costs more. When you have fewer dollars chasing an item, it generally costs less. Folks, that's what's called inflation. In other words, the prices of things are going to cost more. We're already starting to see that with gas prices, for example. If you've paid any attention whatsoever, you've seen an increase. By the way, economists from this isn't political, this is math. Economists across the board pretty much universally agree. A $1 increase in the gas price per gallon, for example, is bigger than any tax hike that the government's ever put on its citizens in history. Why? Well, we pay more at the pump, that makes sense. But also, goods particularly, are shipped through trucks, trains, rail, or airplanes, whatever. They're often shipped, and if you're building a car, for example, all the different parts that go into a car, they're made somewhere and then shipped from one place to another. And guess what? If it costs more to ship those items in a truck or train or an airplane, guess who pays for that? It's not the companies making those products. It's you and I, the consumer. So in other words, we're going to pay more for things. In fact, we're going to pay, again, my prediction, and I don't think this is a bold prediction at all, many times more than what we receive. So should we be excited about getting a check from the government? The answer is no. We should be overwhelmingly dismayed, discouraged, and frustrated. In fact, what right do they have to spend our money like that? I don't care what it's going for. You can argue about the politics of what it should go to and what it shouldn't go to, but what fundamental right, really, does our government have to unilaterally just blow like a drunken sailor our money? Whatever happened to fiscal responsibility? It's been thrown completely out the window. And like I said, sometimes I feel like I'm just, spitting in the wind. And there's nobody listening. And that's why I appreciate when I get these messages from listeners. And I've been getting more and more of them, by the way, lately. So thank you. It's encouraging because sometimes I'm just being real here. Sometimes I wonder, should I just focus on the financial stuff alone, or should I bring up these topics? These basic common sense topics. Okay? And when I get these messages, it encourages me to continue. In fact, I'm probably going to launch what's called a financial literacy series where I'm going to try to video in maybe 10 or 15 minute segments, and we'll put it on our website at yourpersonalbank.com. Some basic financial literacy things. I'll try to start doing that. I think that's going to happen because there's such a lack of basic financial literacy out there. I don't know what it is, or just people don't care. I'm not sure, but I lean towards they don't know. The thing is, too, is I really do not believe that the majority of people in the United States agree with the leftist actions that our government is taking right now. I just don't believe there's a majority. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. I mean, Look at the approval rating of Congress for the last decade or so plus. And I'm not talking about one political party or another here. I'm just talking about the folks that we represent, that we elect to represent us. Are they really representing us or not? And the public approval rating for Congress has been like below 20% most of the time for the last, decade or plus, at least? It's no big secret. In other words, 80% of Americans don't agree with what Congress is doing, yet they continue to do it. Why? Well, clearly they're getting rewarded for it, aren't they? See, if there was no reward in doing what they were doing, like, for example, sending checks to everybody and blowing almost $2 trillion of money that many argue wasn't needed, our economy is on a recovery. COVID is on we're rounding third on it, whether you like it or not. Or, the facts are, the numbers are, COVID cases are coming down. I never agreed with all the shutdowns. I thought we should have been given more. I think our rights were trampled on. Let's put it that way. We gave up far too easily. Our federal government has state, federal, whatever, has recognized our acquiescence to these things. And so few people stood up for their rights. And so they can just go and do whatever they want. See, they gain power. Politicians gain power from, spending money and directing those dollars in certain ways. And by the way, remember, it's not their money they're spending, it's ours. How easy is it to spend somebody else's money? Clearly, quite easy. And the reality is, I'm going to share a very, very strong thought in the next segment about how we should react to this. So I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned and not miss it, because this, I believe, truly is the key to turning our country around or not. So stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. Today we've been talking about if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And again, I'm really referring to, like I've said about before, I'm really disheartened that the majority of Americans are happy that they're receiving a check from the government. And I'm disheartened because what they're not realizing, it's fun to get a check. I get that. But what you need to understand is, where did it come from? See, the government has no money. That's the message that every American needs to truly understand, or at least the majority. How's that? See, where do they get the money? They either printed it, which is going to cause more inflation ultimately, most likely, or they tax somebody for it. They don't have any money. It was taken from. And by the way, if you think you're getting it over and you're taking it from the rich to the poor and all that, no, it doesn't work that way. Because guess what? When you dump $6 trillion into the system, which is what our federal government has spent over the last year, you're going to cause more dollars to chase items. The cost of purchasing items will go up. And by the way, we're already seeing it with gas, aren't we? And by the way, you're going to see it on everything you spend: food, gas, housing, clothes, everything. Because also something that needs to be understood, and this is basic financial literacy that's just not very common. When corporate income when corporations are taxed more, because they're talking about doing that now too. Here's the thing you need to understand. Businesses don't pay those taxes. The consumer does. They increase the cost of that. It just increases the cost of the good that you're buying. Guess who pays for it? You do. Okay? So when you say, we're going to get the rich and all this other stuff, no, here's the reality. When you encourage tax increases, you're just basically increasing taxes on yourself. In fact, I've got a perfect example of this. I used to speak around the country prior to COVID to investor groups about your personal bank concept, which I probably should touch on a little bit here. I'm going to encourage you, if you are not familiar with how your personal bank works, you need to go to our website and listen to some of the previously recorded shows, yourpersonalbank.com. But folks, it's about taking control of your money. And I'll tell you what, I've never seen a more important time in my life to get control. Take back control of your money. Get out of the government system and the qualified plans and things like that. I'm not saying all of it, but certainly create yourself an option to create tax-free income. You think taxes are going to go up in the future? Biden's already announced they're going to raise taxes. Okay? So you need to create that tax-free bucket of money. You need to create the positive arbitrage where you have solid dividends coming in, 6% plus. Even today, history of doing that for over the last 25 plus years, never miss a dividend since before the Civil War, folks. That's what I'm talking about. And then accessing those funds through a bank line of credit, and they're charging 3 to 3.95 when you access those funds. So even when you spend the money, you still make 2 or 3% interest. See, there's nowhere else that I'm aware of financially you can do that. So put your money and let it grow and get the 6% dividends with guarantees, tax-free, income tax-free, okay? And when you have access, liquidity, all that good stuff of your money, the majority of it, day one. And then when you do access it to spend it, to pay bills, buy things, do whatever it is you want or need to do, still pick up 2 or 3% interest. Will you have more money in your pocket? And the answer is yes. Is that going to be more important going forward? Yes, things are going to cost more when inflation starts to come into play. I'm absolutely, I can't, people say it when you say absolutely and certain and those kinds of things. Well, I am convinced, I'm going to say this much, I am convinced that inflation, the cost of things are going to increase in the future. How's that? And a big part of the reason of all the money that's been printed and now distributed out to the American public. Here's the thing. How's this for a novel concept? Talk about financial responsibility or fiscal responsibility. If they can just send us these checks, why not just tax us less? Why not just take less? Why do we have to give it to them for them to turn around and give it to us? Do we really love the politicians that much? See, what I was starting to say, my common joke when I used to speak in places like California, for example. I'm from Arizona. And I would start off my work. Now, remember, this is a group of investors. So these are financially savvy folks. And my common joke I would start with my workshop in places like California is, I just don't really understand you people that well. And they kind of look at me funny. I said, here's the thing I'm going to say is, y'all must love taxes because you just keep voting on increasing them on yourselves or voting people in who increase them. So you must just really love them or something. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Why would you put money into the hands of people who have repeatedly, I'm not talking about one party or another, I'm talking about across the board, who have repeatedly, over and over and over, proved to be serial offenders when it comes to fiscal responsibility? Why would you do that? Stay tuned in the next segment because I'm going to talk about the solution, how we can take control of our country back if we'll just do this.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. We're rounding third and wrapping this up, and this show's been titled, well, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And again, what I really mean by this is I am dismayed. I'm dismayed by the majority of Americans who are happy they're receiving a check from the government. What they don't seem to realize is there's no such thing as free money. I know it's being touted as that. I know it's being sold as that or marketed it, but here's the deal. It's not free. In fact, the federal government has no money whatsoever. None. They don't have any money. The money that they spend comes from taxpayers or they print it. Either it came from someone else or they had to print it, which means if they print too much, which they've done a lot of that this past year, that causes inflation. In other words, more dollars chasing items means there's more things cost more. Guess who pays for that? Everyone. And I'm talking about gas, food, housing, clothing, anything you need or want will cost more in the future for the most part because there's more dollars chasing it. It's just that simple. It's economics 101. It's basic fiscal literacy. Unfortunately, we're missing a lot of that in this country today. That's why I am planning to launch a financial literacy series. We'll record some basic financial literacy topics. I used to teach I've taught this for decades. And hopefully this will be beneficial and educate some people. Now, let's talk about the solution. The power still rests in the people. One thing we can be assured of that politicians want, and I don't really care what political stripe they come from. I think 100% of us can agree on this. Politicians want to remain in power. I don't think that is, anyone could disagree with that statement. And they're going to do the things that they believe benefit them and to retain that power. In other words, why are our politicians spending money like a drunken sailor? The reason's quite simple. They're getting rewarded for it. And it's us, the electorate, that are continuing to reward them. Now, how would we take power back? It's really quite simple. We demand, and I mean it, we demand and insist that our politicians start exercising fiscal responsibility, or they don't get our vote. If enough people would start demanding some basic fiscal responsibility, stop spending money like a drunken sailor. It's not your money, it's mine. You're spending my money recklessly. And if you don't stop, I'm going to vote you out. If they get that message from enough people, guess what would start to happen? See, if someone else was managing your money, and that's what's going on right now, the federal government, our politicians are managing your and my money. If I was managing your money, for example, as a financial representative, I have certain requirements and fiscal responsibility that I have to follow, and fiduciary requirements and various things like that. And if I spent it recklessly, like a drunken sailor, you would immediately leave. You take your money and go elsewhere. And you would be wise to do so. You might even sue me to get the money back because I was acting in a reckless manner. That's what we need to, that's the standard we need to hold our political leaders, our elected leaders to. So far, we've refused to do that. My hope is that a majority of Americans figure this out before it's too late. We need to demand. We can make dramatic changes. Now, in the meantime, that's one avenue. That's the solution, folks. But until the majority of Americans wake up and smell the coffee and recognize that we need to demand our politicians and our elected officials stop spending money like a drunken sailor, which is what they're doing. Until that happens, what can you do to protect yourself? Well, it's really quite simple. Inflation, cost of goods and things, services, most certainly are going to increase overall because of all the extra dollars. That's called inflation, the extra dollars chasing those items. So you want to purchase tangible assets, okay? And the second part is you want to invest in things that are interest rate sensitive. What do I mean by that? Well, when inflation kicks in, interest rates tend to climb along with it because, again, the cost of goods increase. Inflation, interest rates go together. So if you have things like CDs, bonds, annuities, these life policies, these are all high cash value policies, are all interest rate sensitive. Let me give you a quick example. Today, interest rates are the lowest rates we've seen, well, probably ever in the history of our country, actually. And that's why you're seeing mortgage rates below 3%. You're seeing, go to a bank and look at the CD rates. For like a 1-year CD, you're lucky if you can find 1%. It's ridiculous. I see high interest rate savings accounts, money market accounts at banks, things like that. Less than 1%. That's common. See, those are interest rate sensitive accounts. With low interest rates, they don't do so well. All right? But when that changes, that's where you want to be. That's called diversification. Start allocating some assets to interest rate sensitive assets. Bank things like CDs, money markets, annuities, bonds, cash value life policies, like the personal bank policies I'm talking about. The reason I've been such a fan of the cash value policies over the last number of years, the last decade, frankly, is because the extremely low interest rate environment where do you go these days to get a decent rate of return, interest rate rise with some safety and some tax benefits? And the high cash value personal bank policies have been paying the highest interest rates pretty much available with any of the tools. By the way, what does an interest rate sensitive asset do when interest rates climb? It goes up. I've been mentioning we have companies today still paying 6% dividends and have done so every year the last 25 plus years. I can show you the charts, show you the dividend history. But by the way, prior to 08, 09, pretty much all of those companies were paying 7, 8% or higher because interest rates were more normal then. They were higher than they are today. So as interest rates climb, an interest rate sensitive asset's going to climb along with it. What tends to suffer in a higher interest rate or inflation environment? Things like the stock market. Okay? So, folks, I know this past decade or so, the stock market particularly has gone great guns, partly because of the extremely easy money and low interest rate environment. The Fed has helped this along. That's no secret. As that starts to change, so will what does well. The other thing, tangible assets. Now, one tangible asset that comes to mind immediately is, of course, real estate. That's a tangible asset that has a value, and if there's more dollars chasing it, it's going to increase in value. Now, understand, it's not going to go across the board with everything out there, but the reality is, in general, real estate's going to benefit from an inflation or higher interest rate to a degree. Obviously, values of property and stuff can suffer if the interest rates get too high, because then the ability for people to borrow and purchase gets in the way. Makes it more difficult. So then you have fewer buyers, and again, that pushes the price back down, like we saw in the late 70s, okay? So real estate benefits to higher interest rate and inflation to a point, but then if it goes too far, it starts to suffer. That's why an interest rate sensitive asset actually shines. Now, I know there's a lot of folks that are, you hear about the precious metals folks and all that. I'm not against precious metals personally, but I'm also not a huge fan. And I say this because the vast majority of gold reserves, for example, in the world are owned by the central banks. Here's the reality. Who controls the price? The central banks. So if they want to adjust or manipulate the price up or down or whatever, they can easily do that, and they do that. This last year when we saw the COVID crisis and first come into play and the shutdowns and the market dropped 30% in 30 days, the stock market did across the board for the most part, gold didn't really go up because the central banks got involved. So I'm not, I get asked that question all the time. What's your personal opinion? I'm sharing, again, this is a personal opinion. I'm just going what I'm seeing in history, what's happened. And if you've got the central banks manipulating, and I'm putting my banker hat on here. I'm on the board of a bank, right? I'm chairman of the board of a bank in the process of an FDIC insured bank. We're trying to open one up, okay? There's a lot of control manipulation, okay? That's the facts. So I'm not a huge fan of that so much. So I'm sorry to rain on the parade of that area, but a lot of people think that precious metals are a great place to go when inflation kicks up. It can be, but not necessarily. It depends on what the central banks decide to do. And again, are you in control of your money then? The answer is no, not really. So again, my opinion is a interest rate sensitive asset is a great diversification tool. Your personal bank certainly fits into that. High cash value policy, strong dividends, tremendous, the best history of dividend, the longest, strongest dividend history of any financial tool out there. Tax benefits, that's going to be huge. That was my other big prediction I was going to make is, they're going to have to pay for all this money they're spending somehow. And one of the ways I stated is increasing taxes. And don't be surprised if they start to increase taxes. Well, guess what? Biden's already come out and stated he wants to increase taxes, which will be the first time we've seen that since 1993 in our country, if that indeed happens. Higher taxes, it sounds great if you tax the rich, quote unquote, but the reality is, what do the rich really do? I work with many of them, okay? I can tell you firsthand, They just shift their assets to more interest. If they see the taxes are going up, they shift their assets to more tax favorable assets. Your personal bank high cash value policies become even more popular to wealthier individuals. They're not just going to sit there and allow themselves just to be taxed. What do businesses do? Because it impacts a lot of businesses or small businesses. Again, businesses do not pay tax. I mean, not really. Yes, they pay tax to the IRS, but what do? They collect it from the consumer. They increase the price of the goods or services they're selling. It's not complicated, folks. They either reduce their expenses, let people go, whatever, or they raise the price of their good. And who ends up paying for that? You and I. So I guess, again, the moral of the story, the message that I want to share, I'm going to drill this down until, I don't know, I may have to do this the rest of my life. I'm not sure. But the government has no money, folks. It's our money, and we should insist, we should demand, we should require our leaders, our elected officials, our representatives, I don't care what party they are, I don't care what stripe they are, I don't care. We should absolutely demand that they practice some fiscal responsibility with our money. See, it's too easy to spend somebody else's money, isn't it? And if it's somebody else's money, what do you care? And if you get rewarded for doing it, you gain power and influence as a result, which, of course, let's face it, that's what a politician wants. Let's be real. And we need to have a healthy skepticism when they tell us, oh, this is going to do that, or trust us with that, or we're going to take care of you, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. Why should we trust or believe any politician, or the media for that matter, when they tell us they're going to take care of us or they're going to do this or that? Why should we trust a politician more than a used car salesman who's trying to oversell a used car to you? You have a healthy skepticism when that person shares things that are too good to be true. Why don't we have that same skepticism with our elected officials? We need to do that. We need to start exercising some discretion. And again, demand fiscal responsibility. Contact me for yourpersonalbank.com. I'll show you how to take control of your money and start avoiding and putting yourself in a better position financially for what's coming down the road.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may change. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.